Picture a small mountain village in southwestern China. Sichuan province. Somewhere in the middle of the 1960s. The kind of place where there is no electricity. Where the roads are dirt. Where one of 6 children in a family grows up farming, studying by whatever light they can find, dreaming about a world he has never seen. That boy's name was Alysa Liu. And right now, in Milan, Italy, his daughter is standing on an Olympic podium with a gold medal around her neck, the first American woman to win individual Olympic figure skating gold in 24 years. Nobody gets to Alysa Liu's story without going through Arthur's first. And Arthur's story is one of the most remarkable origin stories behind any Olympic champion you have ever heard of. Alysa Liu was born in Mingxing, a village of about 200 people nestled in the mountains of Sichuan, China. His father worked for the government. His mother was a farmer. He was one of 6 children. By his own account, the village did not have electricity when he was growing up. He studied, somehow earned his way into a boarding school in a larger city, and got himself a bachelor's degree and then a master's degree while still in China. And then he was 25 years old. And 1989 happened. If you know that year and that location, you already know what we are talking about. Tiananmen Square. Beijing. The largest pro-democracy movement China had seen in decades. Students, workers, intellectuals, tens of thousands of people gathered to push back against corruption and demand political reform. The Chinese government's response was military. Tanks rolled in. Soldiers opened fire. The official death toll from the government was counted in the hundreds. Independent estimates put it far higher. The Communist Party has worked to erase it from China's history ever since. Alysa Liu was part of those protests. He was a young man who believed in what he was marching for. And when the crackdown came, he understood exactly what staying in China meant for someone who had stood in that square. He left. He came to California. He was a refugee, a man starting over in a country whose language he was still learning, with a law degree from China that meant nothing in the American legal system. He put himself through UC Law School. He built a practice from scratch. He became an immigration attorney because who better to help other immigrants navigate a new country than someone who had done it himself. He built a life. A real one. A good one. But there was something he still wanted. Something he had thought about since he was young, even in that mountain village with no electricity. He wanted a family. Arthur was 40 years old when he made a decision that most people would have found overwhelming. He was single. He had no partner. He was not in a relationship. But he knew he wanted children. So he found a way. Arthur used anonymous egg donors and surrogate mothers to have 5 children. Not 1. 5. Alysa first, then a daughter named Selena, and then triplets Julia, Justin, and Joshua. He did not wait for the right relationship. He did not put his dream on hold. He decided he was going to be a father on his own terms, in his own time. His mother, Alysa's grandmother Shu, moved from China to California to help him raise the kids. A friend also stepped in. And at one point, all 7 of them, Arthur, his mother, his friend, and 5 children, were living in a single 1-bedroom apartment in the Bay Area. 3 bunk beds. 1 room. All of them crowded in together. Alysa told a reporter in 2025 that she looks back on that time with real warmth. She said, "When we were little, we would all sleep in the same room in 3 bunk beds. It was so fun. We would stay up late, crawling around the bunk beds. Honestly, I kind of miss it." That is not the childhood people picture when they imagine an Olympic champion. No sprawling suburban house. No private training facility in the backyard. Just 5 kids in bunk beds and a single dad making it work. When Alysa was 5 years old, Arthur took her to the Oakland Ice Center. She had energy to burn. She was physical and curious and restless in the way that some kids just are from the beginning. Arthur was also, and this detail matters, a huge fan of Michelle Kwan, one of the greatest American figure skaters ever to compete. He thought skating might be a good outlet for his daughter. He had no idea what he was walking into. Alysa started group lessons with a coach named Laura Lipetsky, a former skater who had trained under legendary coach Frank Carroll. Within a very short amount of time, it was clear this was not a normal kid in a group lesson. She was moved to individual sessions almost immediately. She was 5.5 years old. By the time Alysa was 10, she had won the intermediate gold medal at the U.S. Championships, the youngest female skater ever to do it. At 12, she became the youngest woman in history to land a clean triple axel in competition. At 13, she won the U.S. Figure Skating Championship against senior competitors who were years older than her, breaking a record that had been held by Tara Lipinski since 1997. She was the first American woman to land a quadruple Lutz in international competition. She became the first female skater to land both a quadruple jump and a triple axel in the same program. She was doing things on ice that had never been done. And her dad had spent roughly $150,000 a year on training, coaching, ice time, costumes, and travel to make it possible. A refugee who once lived in a village with no electricity, spending 6 figures a year on figure skates. He has said simply, "I spared no money, no time." But here is the part of Alysa's childhood that she is honest about in a way most athletes would rather keep quiet. The skating, for all its glory, was not always joyful. She has said with total candor that her childhood was, in her own words, very abnormal. She skated every single day at 13 and 14. Not 3 times a week. Every day. While other kids her age were figuring out who their friends were, what music they liked, what they wanted to be, she was at the rink before school, at the rink after school, and thinking about the rink before she fell asleep. She attended the Oakland School for the Arts when she could. But as competition travel ramped up and she was missing too many classes, she switched to homeschooling, doing her schoolwork at her dad's law office between practice sessions. She graduated high school at 15. Skating feels more like a responsibility or a burden, even, she said in an interview. Especially as a kid, you don't really know what you want. That is a remarkable thing to say. Not because it is ungrateful, she has never been ungrateful. But because it is real. She was a prodigy who sometimes felt trapped by her own gift. A kid who was extraordinary at something she had not entirely chosen. A teenager carrying the weight of being the future of American figure skating. Before she was old enough to drive, she made the Olympic team at 16. She competed in Beijing in 2022 on Chinese soil, with a security detail around her because her father had been targeted by Chinese government spies, which is its own completely separate story. She came home. She won a bronze at the World Championships, and then she retired. She was 16 years old and she was done. She posted on Instagram that she had been skating since she was 11 years and that she was happy with how her career had gone. She wanted to experience life outside the rink. People were shocked. Some were sad. But she did not ask for anyone's approval. During the time away, she did things she had never had time to do. She traveled with friends. She went on a skiing trip, which is honestly a little ironic for someone whose whole life had been on blades on ice. And a friend on that trip made a casual comment about skating that planted a seed in her mind. She enrolled at UCLA to study psychology. She climbed to the base camp of Mount Everest, 17,000 feet above sea level, for fun, because she was finally free to do things just because she wanted to, and slowly, the joy started coming back. She came back to competitive skating in 2024. But this time, it was different. When she returned, she was the one choosing her music. She was the one picking her costumes and deciding how she wanted her programs to feel. She was not skating because it was expected. She was skating because she wanted to. She told 60 Minutes in 2025 that she had asked her father to be less involved in her training than he had been before. Arthur said he was, quote, a little bit hurt by that. But he understood. And he respected it. She was no longer the daughter finding her identity through her father's dream. She was an adult athlete building something that belonged entirely to her, and in March 2025 at the World Championships in Boston, she won gold. The first American woman to win the world title in 19 years. Nobody had predicted it. She told reporters she had honestly hoped for a top 10 finish in her first season back. She got a world title instead. And then on February 19, 2026, in Milan, Italy, with her father and her 4 siblings in the crowd, bunk bed crew all together one more time, she skated the performance of her life. Landed her jumps. Owned every second of the program. And when it was over, surrounded by her team, she screamed exactly what was in her heart. That's what I'm FNG talking about. 24 years. That is how long America had waited for an Olympic gold medal in women's individual figure skating. Since Sarah Hughes in 2002. Alysa Liu ended that drought at 20 years old, on a night when her father, who once ran from Chinese tanks so he could one day have a family, watched his oldest daughter from the stands and cried. Here is what makes this story different from the standard Olympic comeback narrative. This is not just about a girl who was good at something and worked hard. This is about the full, strange, specific chain of events that had to happen for any of this to be possible. A man had to survive a massacre. He had to choose to leave. He had to start over from zero in a country that was not his. He had to put himself through law school and build a career. He had to decide at 40 that he was going to have children on his own terms, using science, without a partner, in a 1-bedroom apartment with his mother's help. He had to take his 5-year-old daughter to an ice rink one afternoon because he liked Michelle Kwan. He had to spend $150,000 a year for a decade believing in what he saw on the ice. He had to refuse to hand over his daughter's passport to a spy. He had to send her to Beijing on her own, with a security detail, and watch her compete in the country that tried to use her against him. And she had to burn out, step away, find herself, come back on her own terms, and then do something no American woman had done on Olympic ice since before she was born. Every single link in that chain had to hold. And somehow it did. That is Alysa Liu's childhood. That is where the gold medal actually started. Not at the Oakland Ice Center. Not at 13 with the U.S. title. In a mountain village in Sichuan province, in a boy who dreamed about a world he could not yet see.